works. Done a little bit of work on the plane before, which you should be able to see in a moment. Basically worked on the bridge and got the pin ready to put that in. And what I was going to ask you was where you think that should be positioned, because as you know, this is my first wooden plane with a bridge in it. So hey, that's going to be interesting. So I think we'll go straight into that and have a look at what I've done. It's very short, just shows you something on the little lathe that I've got. So let's try that. So this is a little record lathe I had for several years. It's been on the channel a few times before. I'm just centre boring each end of the little billet that I hacksawed off the piece I showed you before, and then just trimming the ends, getting rid of the hacksaw marks, and getting it to a nice sloppy fit in the throat. And then once that's done, obviously the pin, I chose to put the pin straight away through, so I bore a hole using that centre point that I put in, and just running a twist bit through it. I think there's a bit of video on that as well. Yeah, here we go. Now I've actually done brass on a wood turning lathe before. It does work. I must admit I've only done filing and drilling on it. I haven't tried to do it with a cutter. And I think perhaps a cutter would be maybe challenging unless you can put a cross vice or something onto the lathe bed. But I think that's something you could manage to do a bridge on a wood turning lathe if you wanted to. Okay, so today I'm going to be flushing off the sole of the plane, which obviously is now fitted, and I'm going to be chopping out the mouth. And thankfully in this case it doesn't matter how big the mouth is, because we're scrubbing, so we want a relatively big mouth in it. So I don't have to take too many precautions with that. Thanks for telling me the mic's working. Actually, when I should have said, when I go to my streaming software and switch to the picture of me live, the audio mixer comes up and I can see the meters working, so that's good. But it looks as if you can still hear some music, which is daft, so I'll try and turn the music off as well. And well, let's get on with things. So I'll move over to the bench, I shall chop the mouth through, and I shall flush off the sides of the plane. I'll just quick check through the chat, see if any of you have asked anything, read that little bit of video. Yeah, Peter, I've taken some in the past and they worked, but the recent x-rays show there's an awful lot of damage to the joints. So I'm thinking more in the lines of probably replacement joints, which will be a bit of a pain. A lot of time off, I think, during that recovery. Okay, so I shall pop over and start doing that. Don't like the sound of the 3 vertebrae that need to be wired and screwed together. Ooh. Nasty. Well, I wish you good luck with that, Peter. Okay, let's flip over to the bench. I'll give you a side by side and a top view and all that, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So I've clamped the body of the plane down onto the bench. Let me just tip up here. You may not see. I've clamped it to the bench, but I've put a hard beech block underneath it as well, so when I'm chopping down I'm not going to damage the bench, and also I'm not going to break out too much on the rear side of the sole. And just because I have it, I'm using a large mortising chisel and a mallet. And I've got no particular plan on how to get this material out. I should just be chopping away. Obviously with some sort of care, and based on previous experience of chopping mortises. When I get close to the actual shoulders, not the shoulders, what I'm talking about, when I get close to the bed and the front of the mouth, then I'll take a little bit more care. The bed in particular, I want to make sure that that's consistently flat all the way down so that the iron gets support as much as possible. I'm only taking very small chips out at the moment. I think that's probably the safest way to go. Mallet's obviously dried out a little bit. Head came loose there. That's the move from my other workshop into here. Right, let's try and get rid of that with a hoover. What I'll probably do is show you what's going on down the hole there. There we go. So I'm just gradually chipping away down here, making sure I'm staying away from the cheeks, not getting really close to the cheeks, and staying away from the ramp of the bed and also the front of the mouth. Just gradually working my way through. So I'll finish that off later because for you I'm sure it's very boring to watch me do that. Yes, Lego Man, I'm pleased the dovetails look pretty good. What I have done, I've used a little bit of hide glue just to make sure it's going to stick absolutely where it is and not move at all. And that means that I can remove it quite easily just with a bit of heat and moisture in the future. Yes, playing with abutments definitely on my list, so I'll be trying that. Should be very interesting. Right, so let's get back to it. I'm just using a number 5. I've got a hot blade in there. It's nice and sharp. The number 5 hot blade, reasonably fine cut, and I'll just take that slowly. And this is where I think to myself, why did I make the sole as wide as I did? But that's lessons you learn. So my first plane, I've learnt, or first plane like this, I've learnt, yes, make the sole a bit wider, but not make it so much wider that I've done here. And also, to be honest, I think if I were to do this sort of plane in the future, I would cut the tapered sliding dovetails using a router and a jig, because it's quite time consuming, and I think having done one, I know I can do it. So let's take the time and the effort out of it with the justifiable, I think, application of some power. I was almost tempted to saw this excess off. It was sufficiently wide. So I'm pretty much within a hair, I think now, or less than a hair of being flush. So I'll go over to a smoother. So a finer cut now. And this is where you can see some slight problems with the dovetailing. So that's how I'll be doing that on the other side as well. I'll try and bring that in for a bit of a close-up. You can see a few little problems there with the dovetails. There's actually a piece that's broken out from that one. But hey, I think it looks okay. Some broad linseed oil on there from a distance, you won't be able to tell. Now I cleaned up since last time, cleaned the paint off the iron, and obviously what I've realised is I'm going to need to harden this, and my little furnace is, or forge, is very tiny. There's no way I can harden all of this, so I'm going to try something completely different. I'm going to try just to harden at the edge end, the last probably 1.5 to 2 inches, and I'm going to try and do it without taking the temperature up too much on the front of the iron. So in effect I'll have a softer front, softer up the top, and then just a hard, really hard actually, because I won't temper it, back up where the blade is. I'm going to try that, see what happens. Because I've got plenty of iron on here. If it fails, if it chips a lot, hell, I can just grind it off and try and go back for something more conventional. But that'll be a little bit of an experiment. So we have obviously the throat, and somewhere down in there we need to put a bridge. Now in many planes that would just be a pin like so going through, but I've decided to do flying bridge, swinging bridge, flying bridge I think they call it. So I've got my, gosh this is difficult on this camera, I've formed this from the billet of, it's not quite half round I don't think, but anyway whatever it was, formed that on the little lathe, put a hole through it. I've found a pin which is not massively snug, but I think that's going to be ideal. Nice and strong. And I've also got a pin that's slightly smaller than that, so that I can do some test fits first of all, and then just enlarge the hole up gradually until this one's a good press fit. But the problem, which I'm asking for advice on, is whereabouts on the plane, down the throat, should I actually set that? So up near the top, well definitely not up near the top. Down near the bottom, definitely not down near the bottom, but somewhere in between. And I don't know if there's some sort of rule, perhaps 2/3 of the way down, halfway down. So if anyone's got any comments on that, that'd be really useful to know. So Shrenik's saying 2 inches up from the sole, about 1.5 inches from the bed. Okay, so that's one to go in the list. Anybody else got any comments? I might be able to mock it up slightly before I actually drill any holes. And obviously I'm going to be checking with the thickness of the iron and the wedge. That will give me how far away from the bed I need to go. So Shrenik again saying around 2/3 to 3/4 of the way up from the sole to the top of the plane. And that's interesting because what I'm planning on doing, and this is the front, I'm going to be shaping this, so sweeping down in line with the iron and coming around to a lower toe. So that's going to be interesting. That's probably make a slight difference to those proportions. Thanks Peter, that would be useful to know what your scrub plane is. If you can pop that in the, well I think we're messaging on Instagram aren't we now, so if you could tell me through that, that'd be absolutely fantastic. I see Dr. Crazy's still here and I thought he had work, so hope you're not getting caught out. The angle of the iron, the wedge and the bit should work. Yep. Never used a flying bridge, but some modern continental planes use them. I think that's what Peter's going to be looking at. You have an example yourself. Yeah, that'd be great if you could, Lego Man. Yeah, be careful on the road. Wedge angle of about 8 degrees. Yeah, actually we talked about it last time. I'll go and get a protractor and actually measure what I eyeballed, see how close I got to it. And clearly the lower the angle, the tighter the fit will be. So presumably that's an 8 degrees or less. Let's see if I can fit it in here. So I've got 7.3 degrees. So I'm hoping that will be fine. Well, Lego Man's popped off to measure something already. Too tight and you won't get it out. That's a very good point, Shred. Too loose and it won't hold. Well, we shall see. I can always make it slightly steeper when I finish it off. You can see I rough cut this, knowing I'd have to finish it off later. And if there's any inconsistency, non-parallelness, if that's a word, between the bedded iron and the flying bridge, then I'll have to adapt the wedge just to fit that. Make a new wedge? No, I love this wedge. Whatever happens, I'm going to make sure this wedge fits. I think once that's nicely smoothed off and polished up, that's going to look fantastic in there. Scott, things are good. I was speaking to Peter earlier about these and getting a lot of pain from those still. But I'm trying to adapt things. So this plane, and Peter's already given me some good ideas about how I can shape it in a way that's going to be easier to use on my hands. So that's good news. Other than that, fine. And enjoying the lovely sunshine we've got down here today. I was out at 7:30 this morning, just taking a bit of exercise. Now actually, who was it was asking about or mentioned the finish on the, oh, it was Lego Man, he's disappeared for the moment, the finish on the brass that I did. So the finish on this bridge, simply well, so far all I've done is a little bit of a polish, taken off the natural sort of corrosion that was on it before. But I think it was probably referring to the sort of spirally circular end on that, and that's just a case of a result of truing the ends up on the little lathe. And I don't have a particularly sharp cutter in there. And also cutting brass, it doesn't like the angles on the tungsten carbide tip, so it leaves quite a visible track. So for anyone who's jumped in part way through, where are we with the plane? Well, got the sole on. I've used a little bit of liquid hide glue just to make sure it's not going to move at all, but also to allow me to remove it easily if I want to replace it. I've flushed off this side, and I shall be doing the other side later on. I've started cutting through the mouth, and I showed that earlier, and I'll be finishing that off before next time. I've prepared a pin for the bridge and the actual flying bridge itself, and I've prepared the wedge. So if you haven't seen all of those in the previous streams, you can get those on catch up. So Lego Man's back, great. Did you just spot, I probably just talked about it before you came back, the texture on the ends of or patterning on the ends of the flying bridge, just a result of turning it true on the lathe and the cutter that I had in there. So your flying bridge on the example is 42mm up from the sole and 20 from the bed. Okie doke, well I'll have a look at that in comparison with the proportions Shrenik's given me, and Peter's going to send me on his plane as well. And I'll come up with something around about the compromise between all of those positions. Also, the brass looked old. I think that's just a case of the way I photographed it on the keyboard, so it's probably reflecting the black keyboard. Can I use the laser engraver to engrave the bridge? No, I don't have a powerful enough one to tackle metal. I did think engraving it would be quite easy, so I may well be doing that. Right, well, I'm going to call it a day at that. I hope you've enjoyed it. Certainly enjoyed having your company today. And next time, or in the comments, tell me about whether you'd like to see the stream off the phone of me doing the heat treatment, or whether you'd like me to just record it and give you a better quality one as a catch up during the next live stream. Okay folks, thanks very much. Catch you next time. Cheerio.